Alright, this is the start of the stream here. Let me go ahead and make sure that everything is working as I need it to, so it doesn't look like shit. If you can hear it, like breathing in the background, that would be my dog. Yeah, right, so we're here today, we're going to read the classic of poetry, the thing we read about earlier. And again, we're just gonna go through it without any added explanations or any rhetorical analysis or anything like that. And during this reading, I might pause and comment or read things multiple times because while I'm reading it, I might try to reread it to understand it, because I'm reading it for YouTube and for the stream, but I also am kind of reading it for myself. So this is just kind of a way to do that, but to also share it with other people. Let me see. Now I'm going to test the audio here. Let's see. You might be able to hear the music in the background. That's you might be able to hear the music in the. I put on some. I just searched up ancient Chinese music and I put the first video on. So if you want to know where any of that comes from, that's where it is. All right, let's see. Okay, I guess we'll start with the title page. Well, we'll start here with this description, I guess. So it's the book of poetry. It's translated by James Legge. I don't know a lot about this guy. Maybe I should have looked him up. And let's see. Also, I'm using that site, Sacred Texts, and I would really recommend you guys, if anyone's watching this, look up that site. It's really good. It has holy books on pretty much everything, and some stuff that isn't like necessarily a religion, but like they'll have stuff on US UFOs and things like that. All right, let's see here. This is the unabridged translation of the Book of Odes. See the Shi Ching by James Legge. You see how they like spell it differently in English each time? It's hard to tell which one is the correct one, if there is a correct one. Legge translated the Chinese Book of Odes, one of the 5 Chinese classics, in 1876. This edition, scanned from a reprint published in Shanghai in 1931, includes all of the English translations as well as some of the introductory matter from the 1876 edition. It omits the Chinese text found in the original publications. Legge also did all the Chinese translations in the Sacred Books of the East series, including an abridged version of the Shi Ching. So yes, that's okay. So that's what we looked at the other day. Maybe I showed you in the last stream. I don't remember if I did or not. But we looked at that, and it did show some abridged versions, but also gave some explanations. So we're still gonna check that out eventually. Let's see. Okay, let's go read the title page, and we'll just go through this one by one. Okay, we read all this. See, again, they got a weird way of spelling it. So he's a professor of Chinese in the University of Oxford. Okay, that makes sense. Formerly of the London Missionary Society. Alright. Alright, it's a long ass preface. In the third chapter of the... Alright, how the fuck? Also, during the reading, I might not know how to say some words. Of the Prolegomena. What the hell is that? Critical or discursive introduction to a book. I've never heard of that in my life. The author has endeavored to state clearly that the principles on which the metrical version of the Book of China's ancient poetry, published in the present volume, has been made, and will only repeat here that his readers will find in it, in an English dress, the Chinese poems themselves, and not others composed by paraphrase from them. It remains for him to relate how he came to undertake the work and the assistance that he has received in completing it. That was a fucking sentence, huh? While preparing his larger and critical work on the Shi, published at Hong Kong in 1871, though, as he stated in the chapter referred to, he did not think that the collection as a whole was worth the trouble of versifying. It often occurred to him that not a few of the pieces were well worth that trouble, and if he had the time to spare, he would then have undertaken it. Occupied with other Chinese classics, the subject of versifying any portion of the Shi passed from his mind until he received in this book in the spring of 1874 from his nephew, the Reverend John Legge, M.A., whatever the fuck that means, of Brighton, in Victoria, Australia, a suggestion that he should bring out a metrical version of the whole book. To encourage him to do so, his nephew promised his own assistance and that of his brother, the Reverend James Legge, of Hanley, Staffordshire, while another helper might be found in Reverend Alexander Cran. I'm assuming RAV dot means Reverend, but I really don't fucking know. Of Fairfield near Manchester. Okay. Okay, cool. A plan for the versification of all the pieces was drawn out in harmony with this suggestion, and the principles on which the version should be made were laid down. Various cases, however, operated to prevent each of his helpers from doing all the portion that had been assigned to him, and many of the versions which were sent had to be altogether set aside. Fully 3/4 of the volume are the author's own, while he had much to do in revising the other fourth. To all his 3 associates be tenders his most cordial and thanks. Okay. Fuck. Many of the pieces have a beauty which they would not have possessed but for them, and several of them of those especially from Australia, as they came to him, glowed with more of the fire of poetry than they now show. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is from the 1876 editions. Well, it's kind of worded weird. To another gentleman he has also to acknowledge his great obligation. When he was beginning to see the end of his task, be asked his old Hong Kong friend, W.T. Mercer, Esquire, M.A. Oxford, to read and revise his manuscript before it went to the press. He knew he could not have a kinder critic, nor an abler, as all will say who are acquainted with Mr. Mercer's own volume of Under the Peak, or Jottings in Verse, during a lengthened residence in the colony of Hong Kong, published in 1869. Give me 1 fucking second. It's hot as fuck in my room. Let's see. Mr. Mercer kindly acceded acceded to the request and went over every one of the pieces, pruning, correcting, and smoothing the versification and making otherwise various suggestions. He recast some of the pieces in the first part. The author has appended 2 of his recastings to his own versions, and 1, 2, 5 should have been mentioned as entirely his. In other cases, it was found advisable to remake the pieces. To Mr. Mercer also the work is indebted, as the reader will perceive, for Latin versions of some of the pieces. Two metrical versions in German of the old Chinese poems have existed for a good many years. The one was published at Altona in 1833 with the title The Shi Ching. I don't know, I say that. That's just straight up German. Chinesisches Liederbuch? I don't know. Confucius. Okay, yeah. I can't read that shit. It's funny, I took you to 2 years of German in high school. Thanks, George, for that. But I can't remember to pronounce any of that. What the hell are you doing? My dogs joined me. I don't have food. Okay. That's a microphone. I don't know. Alright, good talk. Alright, yeah, so one was published at Altona with that title. The other at Krefeld in 1844 with the title The Shi King Oter. Fuck. And then another long-ass German name. Great. Of these, the former by Ruckert has much the greater merit, and the second translator had it constantly before him. The present version, however, is under no obligation to either, nor can a comparison be instituted between it and them. Kramer says that his version was freely made from Lacharme's Latin translation, nor had Ruckert any other original. Of the character of Lacharme's translation, the author has spoken in the preface to his larger work. Then it says 122 King Henry's Road, London, April 1876. Okay, now the introduction. Get a fucking swig of water 1 second. Okay. So it's immediately we start off with some impronounceable shit. Oh my gosh. What the fuck is this? Alright, so this is in the prolegomena. Let's see how that's pronounced.
Prolegomenon.
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 There you go. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but
Prolegomenon.
This just means an introduction. Okay, it says I've included the first 2 parts of the introduction from the 1876 edition, JBH. Let's see, chapter 1, the early history in the present text of the book of poetry. The book before Confucius, and what, if any, were his labors upon it. And these are statements of Chinese scholars. So we start off with the name SESZE-MATS apostrophe E. I don't know what the fuck that is. Somebody's name. In his memoir of Confucius says, In his memoir of Confucius says, the old poems amounted to more than 3,000. Confucius removed those which were only repetitions of others, and selected those which would be serviceable for the inculcation of propriety and righteousness, ascending as high as Say and Hao-Tse, and descending through the prosperous eras of Yin and Chao to the times of descendants under kings Yu and Lei. He selected in all 305 pieces, which he sang over to his lute to bring them in accordance with the musical style of the Shao, the Wu, the Ya, and the Sung. This is the first notice which we have of any compilation of ancient poems by Confucius, and from it mainly are derived all the subsequent statements on the subject. In the history of the classical books in the records of the Sui dynasty from AD 589 to 618, it is said, when odes ceased to be made and collected, Che, the grand music master of Lu, arranged in order those which were existing and made a copy of them. Then Confucius expurgated them. What the fuck is that? Expurgated them. We're gonna look that up too. I'll tell you what it means. It's
expurgate.
Expurgate, okay. Remove matter thought to be objectionable or unsustainable. There you go. And going up to the Shang dynasty and coming down to the state of Lu, he compiled altogether or 300 pieces. Gao Yang Su, AD 1006 to 1071, endeavors to state particularly what the work of expurgation performed by Confucius was. Not only, says he, did the sage reject whole poems, but from others he rejected one or more stanzas. From stanzas he rejected one or more lines, and from lines he rejected one or more characters. So this was some very meticulous work. This was all to preserve or to inculcate propriety and righteousness. Okay. And then we got some green text here. It's, I guess, like a later note. These statements not supported by evidence. The view of the author is, I have not been able to find evidence sustaining these representations, and propose now to submit to the reader the considerations which prevent me from concurring in them, and have brought me to the conclusions that before the birth of Confucius, the book of poetry existed substantially the same as it was at his death, and that while he may have somewhat altered the arrangements of its books and odes, the principal service which he rendered to it was not that of compilation, but the impulse to the study of it, which he communicated to his disciples. The discrepancy in the number of the odes is given in the above statements will be touched on in a note. And so again, that's just his statement. His statements aren't supported by evidence. It's just the view of the author. But that does seem to be a likely theory. But when I was reading the Analects, it seemed like whenever he would reference or explain something written in the odes, that it seemed like he held it in high praise, but it could have also been that he held it in high praise because he had something to do with the compilation of it or with its creation. So it could be something like that, but it does seem more likely that it existed before him, at least most of it. Alright, and in the green text it says the groundlessness of the above representations. 2. If we place to Sin's composition of the Memoir of Confucius in BC 100, nearly 400 years will thus have elapsed between the death of the sage and any statement to the effect that he expurgated a collection of poems, or he compiled previous to that which we have now, consisting of a few over 300 pieces, and no writer in the interval, so far as we know, had affirmed or implied any such facts. But independently of this consideration, there is ample evidence to prove, first, that the poems current before Confucius were not by any means so numerous as says Zimasins, I don't know, says. And secondly, that the collection of 300 pieces or thereabouts, digested under the same divisions as in the present classic, existed before the sage's time. Let me read that shit again. Okay, cool. Okay. Alright, so you're saying it's possible. And then in the green text by this next paragraph I'm about to read, it says the old poems were not numerous. It would not be surprising if, floating about and current among the people of China in the 6th century before Christ, there had been even more than 3,000 pieces of poetry. The marvel is that such was not the case. But in the narratives of the states, a work attributed by some to Zhou Ku-ming, there occur quotations from 31 poems made by statesmen and others, all anterior to Confucius, and of those poems it cannot be pleaded that more than 2 are in the present classic, while of those 2 one is an ode of it. What the fuck? One is an ode of it quoted under another name. Further, in the So Chuan? I don't know how to say that. Certainly the work of Zhou Ku-ming, and a most valuable supplement to Confucius's own work of the Chun Tzu, we have quotations from not fewer than 219 poems, and of these only 13 are not found in the classic. Thus, of 250 poems current in China before the supposed compilation of the Book of Poetry, 236 are found in it, and only 14 are absent. I guess I haven't read this much in a while. To use the words of Chao Yi, a scholar of the present dynasty, of the period Qin Lung, AD 1736 to 1795, if the poems existing in Confucius's time had been more than 3,000, the quotations found in these 2 books of poems now lost should have been 10 times as numerous as the quotations from the 305 pieces said to have been preserved by him, whereas there are only between a 21st and 22nd part of those from the existing pieces. This is sufficient to show Sin's statement is not worthy of credit. I have made the widest possible induction from all existing records in which there are quotations of poems made anterior to Confucius, and the conclusion to which I have been brought is altogether confirmatory of that deducted from the works of Zhou Ku-ming. If Confucius did not make any compilation of poems, he had no such work of rejection and expurgation to do as is commonly imagined. But again, like we read earlier, it says the old poems were not numerous, so it's more possible than this author previously thought, at least. I think. Okay, give me one moment. Let me grab something. Be right back. Alright, Psycho's right next to me. Cool. Proofs of the existence of the book of poetry before the time of Confucius. Let me rearrange my mic here. Okay. Fuck. Let's put it right here. I'm sure that sounds really good in the stream and video, which I should check on. Okay, looks fine. Check the Twitch. Okay, cool. Alright. But I believe myself that he did no work at all to which the name of the compilation can properly be applied, but simply adopted an existing collection of poems consisting of 305 or at most of 311 pieces. Of the existence of the Shi or book of poetry before Confucius, digested under 4 divisions and much in the same order as present, there may be advanced the following proofs. First, in the official book of Chou, or Chao, we are told that it belonged to the Grand Master to teach the 6 classes of poems: the Feng, with their descriptive, metaphorical, and elusive pieces, the Ya, and the Sung. Mr. Wiley, I think I'm saying that right. Mr. Wiley says that the question of the genuineness of the official book may be considered as set at rest since the inquiry into it by Chu He, and that it is to be accepted as a work of the Duke of Chao or some other sage of the Chao dynasty without committing... Okay, that's a fucking end of the sentence. What? Okay, so he's saying essentially that it is genuine because we can say it's an accepted work of the Duke of Chao or some other sage of the Chao dynasty. Okay. Without committing myself to any opinion on this point, as I find the passage just quoted in the preface to the Shi, of which I shall treat in the next chapter, I cannot but accept it as having been current before Confucius, and thus we have a distinct reference to a collection of poems earlier than this time, with the same division into parts, the same classification of the pieces in those parts. What the fuck? I did not realize how long this was. I guess it's really not that much, but I guess I'm just a slow reader or something. Second, part 2 of the Shi, book 6, ode 6, an ode assigned to the time of the King Yu, or to the time of King Yu, BC 780 to 770, we have the words, "They sing the Ya and the Nan, dancing to their flutes without error." So early then as the 8th century before our era, there was a collection of poems, of which some bore the name of the Nan, which there is nothing to forbid our supposing to have been the Chao Nan and the Shao Nan, forming the first 2 books of the first part of the present classic, often spoken of together as the Nan. What the fuck? Yeah, the Nan. Okay. and of which others bore the name of the Ya, being probably the earlier pieces which now compose the large portion of the second and third parts. Third, in the narratives of Tzu King Ku Ming, under the 29th year of Duke Song, I don't know, I'm just guessing with these names, BC 543, when Confucius was only 8 or 9 years old, we have an account of a visit to the court of Lu by an envoy from Wu, an eminent statesman of the time and of great learning. Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. We are told that as he wished to hear the music of Chao, which he could do better in Lu than in any other state, they sang to him the odes of the Chao Nan and the Shao Nan, those of Pei, Yung, and Wei, of the royal domain, of Qing, of Sei, of Pin, of Suin, of Sin, of Wei, of Tang, of Chun, of Kuei, of Sao. They sang to him also the odes of the minor Ya and the greater Ya, and they sang finally the pieces of the Sung. We have here, existing in the boyhood of Confucius, before he had set his mind on learning, what we may call the present book of poetry, with its Feng, its Ya, and its Sung. The odes of the Feng were in 15 books as now, with merely some slight differences in the order of their arrangement. The odes of Pin forming the 9th book instead of the 15th. Those of the Sin, of the 10th instead of the 11th. Those of the Wei, the 11th instead of the 9th. And those of the Tang, the 12th instead of the 10th. In other respects, the Shi existing in Lu when Confucius was a mere boy appears to have been the same as that of which the compilation has been ascribed to him. Okay, cool. So, yeah, I guess that's an interesting account of that. I'm not sure if this green text is supporting him or against him. It looks like it supports him here, then. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Fourth, in this matter, we may appeal to the words of Confucius himself. Twice in the Analects he speaks of the odes as a collection consisting of 300 pieces. Oh, shit, well. That work not being made on any principle of chronological order, we cannot positively assign those sayings to any particular period of Confucius's life. But it is, I may say, the unanimous opinion of the critics that they were spoken before the time to which Sei, Ma Sin, and Chu, he, refer his special labor on the book of poetry. The reader may be left with the evidence which has been set before him to form his own opinion on the questions discussed. To my own mind, that evidence is decisive on the points. I guess I'm not a good reader, I don't know. The book of poetry, arranged very much as we have it now, was current in China long before the sage, and its pieces were in the mouths of statesmen and scholars, constantly quoted by them on festive and other occasions. Poems not included in it there doubtless were, but they were comparatively few. Confucius may have made a copy for the use of himself and his disciples, but it does not appear that he rejected any pieces which had been previously received, or admitted any which had not previously found a place in the collection. Now again, these are scans from a book that came out in 1876, so there may be new updates to this that we don't know about, or at least that I don't know about. And so, I don't know. We definitely know there are texts that are saying that it existed before him, but I mean, that's just history, isn't it? Sorry, I'm just coughing so much. The green text here says, further errors in the statements in the first paragraph. Having come to the above conclusions, it seems superfluous to make any further observations on the statements adduced in the first paragraph. If Confucius expurgated no previous book, it is vain to try and specify the nature of his expurgation, as Gao Yang Su did from Sei Ma Sins. We should suppose that there were no odes in the Shi later than the time of King Li, whereas there are 12 of the time of King Hui. I guess that's how you say that. 13 of that of King Shang, and 2 of the time of King Ting. Even the Song of Li, which are referred to by the Sui writer, and Chu He, that name always gets me, and Chu He, are not the latest pieces in the book. This statement of the former, that the odes were arranged in order and copied by Che, the music master of Lu, rests on no authority but its own. More than 1,000 years after the time of Confucius, I shall refer to it again, however, in the next chapter. What the fuck is next? Alright, the content's cool. Thank God. Huh. Okay. Did Confucius then do anything for the book of poetry? The green text says. The paragraph is, the question arises now of what Confucius really did for the book of poetry, if indeed he did anything at all. The only thing from which we can hazard the slightest opinion on the point we have from his own lips, in the Analects 9, he tells us, I returned from Wei to Lu, and then the music was reformed, and the pieces in the Ya and the Sung all found their proper places. The return from Wei to Lu took place when the sage was in his 69th year, only 5 years before his death. He ceased from that time to take active part in political affairs, and solaced himself with music. The study of the classics, the writing of the Chun Tzu, and familiar intercourse with those of his disciples who still kept about him. He reformed the music, that to which the poems were sung, but wherein the reformation consisted we cannot tell. And he gave to the pieces of the Ya and the Sung their proper places. I apologize. Shit. The present order of the books in the Feng, slightly differing, we have seen from that which was common in his boyhood, may also have now been determined by him. As to the arrangement of the odes in other parts of the work, we cannot say of what extent it was. What are now called the correct Ya precede the pieces called the Ya of a changed character and of a degenerate age. But there is no chronological order in their following one on another, and it will be seen from the notes on the separate odes that there are not a few of the latter classes, which are illustrations of a good reign and of the observance of propriety, as much as any of the former. In the books of the Sung, again, the occurrence of the praise songs of Lu between the sacrificial odes of Chao and Shang is an anomaly for which we try in vain to discover a reasonable explanation. I mean, I just can't stop coughing. I don't know. We're 40 minutes in the stream, and I guess the video. And we're not past the introduction. That's great. Good. Alright, Confucius' service to the Shi was in the impulse which he gave to the study of it. That's what the green text says. While we cannot discover, therefore, any peculiar labors of Confucius on the book of poetry, we have it now, as will be shown in the next section, substantially as he found it already compiled to his hand. The subsequent preservation of it may reasonably be attributed to the admiration which he expressed for it, and the enthusiasm for it with which he sought to inspire his disciples. It was one of the themes on which he delighted to converse with them. He taught that it is from the odes that mind receives its best stimulus. A man ignorant of them was, in his opinion, like one who stands with his face towards a wall, limited in his views and unable to advance. I think that's a good thing we're reading it, huh? Of the two things which his son could specify as particularly enjoined on him by the sage, the first was that he should learn the odes. In this way, Confucius probably contributed largely to the subsequent preservation of the book of poetry. The preservation of the tablets on which the odes were inscribed, and the preservation of its memories of all who venerated his authority and looked up to him as their master. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see how much we got. We don't have that much left. I could probably read through that before an hour passes. I'm gonna drink the rest of this shit. Alright, we're on to section 2. The book of poetry from the time of Confucius till the general acknowledgement of the present text. From Confucius to the dynasty of Sein. That's in the green text there. Of the attention paid to the study of the book of poetry from the death of Confucius to the rise of Suin's dynasty, we have abundant evidence in the writings of his grandson Zhe, we'll call him, of Mencius, in Xuan Kang. One of the acknowledged distinctions in Mencius is his acquaintance with the odes, of which his canon for the study of them prefixed to my larger volumes is a proof. And Sun King survived the extinction of the Chao dynasty and lived on into the times of Suin. The poems were all in the green text it says the poems were all recovered after the fires of Cixin. I think that's the that TS apostrophe IN is the that time we read about in the Wikipedia where it was like the book burning. Yeah, I think that was it. Okay, cool. And then there was also a contrary statement saying that they actively didn't burn those books, but we don't know. The poems shared in the calamity which all other classical works, excepting the Yi, suffered when the tyrant Sin issued his edict for their destruction. But I have shown in the in the introduction to Volume 1 that only a few years elapsed between the execution of his decree and the establishment of the Han dynasty, which distinguished itself by its labors to restore the monuments of ancient literature. The odes were all, or very nearly all, recovered, and the reason assigned for this is that their preservation depended on the memory of scholars more than on their inscription upon tablets and silk. We shall find reason to accept this statement. Okay. Okay, we got in the green it says 3 different texts. 3 different texts of the Odes made their appearance early in the Han Dynasty, known as the Shi of Lu, of Se, and of Han. That is, the book of poetry was covered from 3 different quarters. Oh, okay, cool. They get, yeah. Okay, I think I remember this. So I haven't read this yet, but I know the Mao. This is a 4th text out of Mao. I think that's a Maoshi. And then these other ones are like 3 different versions, right? And we only have like pieces of the other 2. Or maybe all 3, I'm not sure. Damn. Okay. Lu Hin's catalog of the works in the Imperial Library of the earlier Han Dynasty commences on the Shi King with a collection of the 3 texts in 28 chapters, which is followed by 2 works of commentary on the text of Lu. The former of them was a Shinpei, of whom we have some account in the literary biographies of Han. He was a native of Lu, and had received his own knowledge of the Odes from a scholar of Se called Thao Ku Pi. He was resorted to by many disciples whom he taught to repeat the Odes, but without entering into discussion with them on their interpretation. When the first emperor of the Han Dynasty was passing through Lu, Shin followed him to the capital of the state and had interviewed with him. The Emperor Wu, in the beginning of his reign, BC 139, sent for him to court when he was more than 80 years old, and he appears to have survived a considerable number of years beyond that advanced age. My throat's just drying out like a motherfucker, I don't know. Where are we at? The dames of 10 of his disciples are given, all men of eminence, and among them Kung, Gan Kuo. Okay, those 2 important people. A little later, the most noted adherent of the school of Lu was a Wei Hin, who arrived at the dignity of prime minister, and published the Shi of Lu in stanzas and lines. Up and down in the books of Han and Wei are found to be quotations of the Odes, which must have been taken from the professors of the Lu recension. But neither the text nor the writings on it long survived. They are said to have perished during the Xin Dynasty, AD 265 to 419, when the catalog of the Sui Library was made. None of them were existing. Damn. That would have been interesting. We'd be reading all these shits if we could. Okay. Now to the text of Se. Se? I'm just gonna say Se. T-S apostrophe E. The Han catalog mentions 5 different works on the Shi of Se. This text was from a Yuan Ku, a native of Se, about whom we learn from the same chapter of the literary biographies that he was one of the great scholars of the court in the time of the Emperor King, BC 155 to 142. A favorite with him, and especially distinguished for his knowledge of the Odes and his advocacy of Orthodox Confucian doctrine. He died in the next reign of Wu, more than 90 years old, and we are told that all the scholars of Se, who got a name in those days for their acquaintance with it. And we are told that all the scholars of Se, who got a name in those days for their acquaintance with the Shi, sprang from his school. Among his disciples is the well-known name of He Hao, Che Chang, sure, who communicated his acquisitions to Hao Sang, a native of the present Shantung province, and author of 2 of the works in the Han catalog. Hao had 3 disciples of eminence, Yi Feng, Sao Wang Che, and Quang Hong, from the text of... Okay, what? Hao had 3 disciples of eminence. Fuck, that's confusing. Okay, then he names them. Okay, from the text of Sais was transmitted to others, whose names, with quotations from their writings, are scattered through the books of Han. Neither text nor commentaries, however, had a better fate than the Shi of Lu. There is no mention of them in the catalog of Sui. I don't know. They are said to have perished even before the rise of Xin Dynasty. Damn. I could have swore in that Wikipedia article that they said there were a few surviving documents. Maybe I just can't read, I don't know, but I thought there were. Okay, we're finally done. Almost done with this shit. And my throat is gonna die. I'm gonna fucking die. A 4th text, that of Mao, spelled M-A-O-U, but I think it's the one that we read about earlier. The Maoshi. But while these 3 different recensions of the Shi all disappeared, with the exception of the single fragment, their unhappy fate was owing not more to the convulsions by which the empire was often rent, and the consequent destruction of the literary monuments, such as we have witnessed in our own way in China, than to the appearance of a 4th text, which would displace them by its superior correctness and the ability with which it was advocated and commented on. This was what is called the text of Mao. It came into the field later than the others, but the Han catalog contains the Shi of Mao in 29 chapters and a commentary on the text in 30. According to the Kong Xing, the author of this commentary was a native of Li, known as Mao Huang, or the Greater Mao, who was a disciple, we are told by Lu Timing, of Sun King. The work is lost. He had communicated his knowledge of the Shi, however, to another Mao, Mao Chang, or the Lesser Mao, who was a great scholar at the court of King Hien of Ho-King. This King Hien was one of the most diligent laborers in the recovery of the ancient books, and presented Mao's text and the work of Hong at the court of the Emperor King, probably in BC 129. Chang himself published his explanations of the Shi in 29 chapters, which still remain, but it was not until the reign of Emperor Ping, AD 1-5, that Mao's recension was received into the Imperial College and took its place along those of Li's, Sais, and Han. Huh. Damn. Can't believe that's the only one left. Maybe, I think I read somewhere that they did recover some of the others. Because it kind of sucks that they're gone. Did I skip something? Did I skip this? Fuck, yeah, I did skip this. Shit. So we just, oh my gosh. Can't believe I'm gonna read this shit out of order because I fucking missed the Han Ying. Bro, it's like 2:35 a.m. Okay, look. Alright. Fuck. Did I really skip over that? Okay, well, we're gonna read. Okay, so we just read a little bit on the fourth text of that of Mao. We're gonna go take a step back to the text of the Han Ying because I'm a fucking idiot and I somehow missed it. Unless I'm crazy and I did read it. If so, just skip past this shit. The text of Han was somewhat more fortunate. The Han catalog contains the titles of 4 works, all by Han Ying, whose surname is thus perpetuated in the text of the Shi which emanated from him. His biography follows that of Hao Sang. He was a native, we are told, of the province of Yin and a great scholar in the time of the Emperor Wan, BC 178 to 156, and on into the reigns of King and Wu. He labored, it is said, to unfold the meaning of the odes and published an explanation of the text and illustrations of the Shi, containing several myriads of characters. His text was somewhat different than that of the text of the Shi of Liu and Sais, but substantially of the same meaning. Of course, Han founded the school, but while almost all the writings of his followers soon perished, both the works just mentioned continued on through the various dynasties of the time of Sung. The Sui catalog contains the titles of his text and 2 works on it. The Pang, those of his text and his illustrations. But when we come to the catalog of Sung, published in the time of the Yuan dynasty, we find only the illustrations. In 10 books or chapters, and Gao Yang Su tells us that in his time this was all of Han that remained. It continues entire or nearly so to the present day. Okay, so that was the Han. We're going back to the Mao, the Maoshi. I'm just coughing right to the fucking mic, whatever. The Chinese critics have carefully traced the line of scholars who had charge of Mao's text and explanations down to the reign of Ping, Quan, Chang, Qing, He Hui, Yi Ning, and Cao Gao. To Cao Gao succeeded Qin Kai, who was in office at the court of the usurper Wang Mang, AD 9 to 22. He transmitted his treasures to Sei Man King, who himself commented on the Shi, and from him they passed to the well-known Wei King Chung or Wei Huang, of whom I shall have to speak in the next chapter. From this time the most famous scholars addicted themselves to Mao's text. Qi Kuei, AD 25 to 101, published a work on the meaning and difficulties of Mao's Shi, having previously compiled a digest of the differences between its text and those of the other 3 recensions at the command of the Emperor Ming, AD 58 to 75. Mao Yung, AD 69 to 165, followed with another commentary. And we arrive at Qing Huan, or Qing Kang Xing, who wrote his supplementary commentary to the Shi of Mao, and his chronological introduction to the Shi. The former of these 2 works, complete, and portions of the latter are still extant. Okay. That the former has great defects as well as great merits, there can be no question. But it took possession of the literary world of China, and after the time of Qing, the other 3 texts were little heard of. While the names of the commentators on Mao's text and his explanations of it speedily became very numerous, Mao's grave is still shown near the village of Sunfu in the Department District of Hokkien. Okay. Oh, fuck. The footnotes, I totally ignored those. Fuck! I guess they weren't fucking important, whatever. The different text guarantees the integrity of the recovered chi. The texts were all taken down from recitation. Recitation, I think. Okay, we're on the last shit. Returning now to what I said in the second paragraph, it will be granted that the appearance of the three different and independent texts immediately after the rise of the Han Dynasty affords the most satisfactory evidence of the recovery of the book of poetry. As it had continued from the time of Confucius, unfortunately, only fragments of them remain now. But we have seen that they were diligently compared by competent scholars with one another. And with the fourth text of Mao, which subsequently got the field to itself, in the body of the larger work, attention is called to many of their peculiar readings. Peculiar? Why can't I fucking say that word? Peculiar readings. It is clear to me that their variations from one another and from Mao's text arose from the alleged fact that the preservation of the odes was owing to their being transmitted by recitation. The rhyme helped the memory to retain them, and while wood, bamboo, and silk were all consumed by flames of Sun, when the time of repression ceased, scholars would be eager to rehearse their stories. It was inevitable that the same sounds, when taken down by different writers, should in many cases be represented by different characters. Accepting the text as it exists, we have no reason to doubt that it is a near approximation to that which was current in the time of Confucius. Fuck. Alright, cool. That's some light reading, you know. Thank God I don't read books out loud when I read them myself. I'd blow my brains out. Okay, then we have the start. Alright, we'll save this from... I don't think I need to read the fucking contents, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, next video / stream we will we'll start the fucking classic of poetry. Sorry, I was making sure my mic was coming through. Cool, yeah. So thanks for watching if you watched this. And join me again.